The person who is high intelligence and high talent, but little to no experience is my favorite kind of hire. And here's why. That person is going to grow with you, right? Their curve may start at the bottom, but because they're smart and because they're talented, it's exponential. That growth goes straight through the roof as long as you're investing in them. But that investment that you make in them, statistics show that they're going to make that back in your company. Loyalty, we don't see loyalty a whole lot anymore. There's a reason that pensions have gone by the wayside. We just don't need them because people don't stay. But when you invest in that high intelligence and high talent person, studies show that they will stay 2 to 3 times longer than the average worker.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Marketing Blender. I am Dacia Coffey, and I am joined by my fabulous co-host, Ryan Heath. Thank you so much for being on today.
Happy to be here.
So today's topic is stop the hiring and firing revolving door. How to find B2B marketers and salespeople that actually drive revenue growth. So I am super excited. I almost am like a little nervous because we hire so many marketers.
Yep.
And we work with dozens and dozens of marketing teams and sales teams. I think we know a thing or two about this.
Maybe.
Yeah, and I always want to start with, it is, I know it's going to sound like we're kind of crucifying some leadership teams, around some of their practices. But before we go there, marketers and salespeople are amazing communicators.
No question.
That's why all of us, no matter what specialization we have, like went into a communication field, is because we're kind of good at this also. And so people do fall in love with the marketer in front of them or that salesperson, and they are influential and they are bringing natural gifts. But the problem is, are those the gifts you actually need in order to drive revenue? And that's where it gets really murky, because you've got these really talented, influential people and then a lot of missteps leading up to whether or not they're the right fit.
Boy, there's no question. And, we were talking earlier about the difference between alignment and agreement is you can have so many wonderful communicators, as you put them, that can be very agreeable and in person via Zoom, can create that, I'm going to call it kind of a surface level connection, but are they truly aligned with what it is that you need with what your marketing plan?
Yes.
Has the direction that it's taking you? And that's the question that I think we should dig into a little bit.
Okay, so uncover that a little bit more, because I could not agree. Like when I'm doing CEO presentations and private speaking engagements, I talk a boatload about alignment, and the research on high alignment teams across sales, marketing, and ops is remarkable. I mean, they exceed lead generation, they exceed revenue, they exceed profit, they grow at a much more rapid pace, and shocking, they keep their people longer, obviously, because basically alignment is about having a high performing team. So, all right, there's alignment. Agreement. Because they sound super similar, but they're not.
Correct.
So what does agreement look like?
When I think about what you just talked about in terms of alignment, there's a deep philosophical, almost belief to that.
Yeah.
Right? There's intrinsic core values that you share without even having to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Being agreeable, having someone that is in agreement with what you're doing is they listen to it coming from you.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, that sounds like a good idea. I could go along with that.
Yeah. I'll just go do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so interesting, because we hire for high levels of skepticism naturally. Like, people with intense skepticism really thrive on our team because we want iron sharpening iron. We want mastery. And I want people committed to the goal, not committed to whether or not, I said, I want you to do this, or you said, hey guys, I think this is a good idea. I mean, I want people like, no, the goal's over there and you're trying to point us there,
It's really interesting because we kind of perk up when we find someone that we feel like could be like the devil's advocate.
Yes.
Most people would throw that person out and we're like, oh, you're going to disagree with us? I love it. Let's hear more.
Yes, exactly. And that's actually a first weird little tip I want to give to you guys. When you're hiring, especially if you're hiring a marketer, high levels of skepticism, healthy skepticism, not a no person, but a skeptical, critical thinker can be incredibly powerful in really sharpening the ideas and making sure that what they are deploying is on point for the outcome. So I didn't even know we were going to give that nugget so early, but I'm excited.
I didn't either. But you think about it, as long as the inherent level of trust is there,
yeah,
you can pick the plan apart to a point where when the client gets it, it's done, it's there. And ultimately, that's the goal.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the real cost of a bad hire. Like in our company, but also in your full career, you've done loads of hiring at all levels of experience. So what's the cost of a bad hire?
Well, let's back up. So I found this stat. Do you know that 74% of employers have admitted to making the wrong hire?
Oh, I'm surprised it's that low.
Well, hang on. The key word there is admitted.
Admitted, yes.
Okay,
true.
the other 26% are lying to you.
Yeah, exactly.
The true cost of making a bad hire is almost incalculable. You can put a financial value to it based off that person's salary, how long it takes to train, your investment in that. But the effect on the greater team and on your overall progress, it could be anywhere from 1 to 3 to 6 months of lost time productivity, in terms of your overall plan. But what that does to everybody else is huge.
Exactly. We worked with a company not too long ago that had pretty bad churn. And when we put the ROI calculation around the bad hires and what they were losing by churning so many people, they at the minimum agreed that they were losing minimum $2 million of bottom line profit per year. And the leadership team was like, that's probably too low. So the ROI calculation, where it's like, if we can even improve this a little bit, is just astronomical. But you're right, because the conversation beyond the dollars around lost productivity, lost customer experience, lost culture, lost tribal knowledge, just so much is horrifying, and it can't be quantified. And so it's huge.
No, and the biggest one that people don't talk about is other team members that you lose.
Yeah.
Because when you have the wrong person in place, the way that affects your culture, the way that affects your morale can be catastrophic.
Yeah.
And when you start losing great team members because of a bad hire, that's when things can really take a nosedive.
Absolutely. And no leader wants to lose someone,
No.
whether from quitting or from firing. Like, that is not the scenario when you are interviewing, hoping, I hope, one out of every so many people don't make it. No one is thinking like that. So, it really takes an emotional toll on, both the person that obviously left the company, but also those that had to make that hard decision or that lost them when they didn't want to. So all around, not good, and investing more in this, but especially on the marketing and sales side, because I think that's one of the things is that people get better and better and better at their delivery and the operational model. And man, this marketing and sales churn, I don't see it getting better. I see it getting worse.
And it's interesting because your people are one of your few assets that actually appreciate.
Yeah.
We sink so much money into processes and systems and getting new software and you name it, that ultimately they're all depreciating assets. When you invest in your people, that is a long-term investment for which the rate of return is through the roof if you stick with it.
Oh my gosh, 100%. Absolutely. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about why traditional hiring methods fail. But first, let's talk about what are some traditional hiring methods or bad habits that you see out there.
Oh man, okay. So many times I'll see people that will put job descriptions together based off their pain points.
Oh, so good. You're so right.
Where are all of the different things, what are all the different problems that we have? We'll write them down. Well, we need someone who has this skill and this skill to fix this. And what we end up putting together is a job description for a perfect person. That doesn't exist.
Yeah.
The problem is that when you plug that job description into your ATS, it's immediately going to start rejecting some really great people that just don't happen to tick off all the boxes. And the people that do come through are maybe some folks that know how to play that ATS game.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily sure that's the kind of person you want on your team.
Yeah. What comes to mind for me is that that idea that you can't save your way into prosperity. Right. Like by focusing on pain, problems, and shortcomings, that does not leapfrog you towards your goal. And so immediately I go, ruh-roh, you're fixing tactical issues without writing a job description focused on true outcomes and progress.
Yeah, I think another point is there's so many hiring managers that are focused on tool proficiency. Our tools are the key that opens a lot of different doors, but if we're only looking for that perfect HubSpot person, that perfect Adobe person, we're missing all of the other, sometimes more important skills that you need to have someone who's going to knock it out of the park.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm assuming every single person hiring a marketer nowadays is saying, do you use AI?
Well, for sure.
Everyone is saying yes, but I want to know the philosophy behind that, when and why. I want examples. I want all sorts of things. So I love what you're saying there about the tools.
Yeah, if you think about it, you can teach someone software.
Yeah.
I mean, most softwares can teach someone how the software works.
Yeah, exactly.
But if someone can't think strategically, can't communicate strategically, and can't do it with empathy, no amount of software is going to save them.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one really great thing that Ryan's talking about is we want a HubSpot expert, or we want somebody that's not going to write terrible emails, or we want somebody that's better at social media. But that is not a prosperity and progress mindset. So when we're thinking roles and goals, I want you thinking total marketing success, right? So for instance, do you have a lead generation problem? And I mean a real one. Well, then do you need a lead generation specialist? Or, are you really wanting to deploy brand and be heart forward and really show off your culture? Well, maybe that's a designer, right? If you're hiring for salespeople, there's a huge difference between a hunter or a closer or a gatherer. Huge difference, right? And then on top of that, you already have to have an environment to set people up for success. One of the big things we see is hiring a really smart young marketer, and they're like, go. So there's no CRM setup, there's no mark tech. They don't know anything about process and alignment. They don't know anything about how their work is supposed to roll into pipeline management. And we're just praying that this great 23-year-old, is going to bring so many whiz-bang ideas to the table that you're going to fix 2 decades of bad habits around technology and sales process follow-up and marketing and sales alignment. Not so much. So the role and the goal, really important in a job description.
Well, and there's an element to that when we talk about traditional hiring practices that I think kind of facilitates that negative thought process. We talked earlier about looking for skills or experience or intelligence first, and it's missing the culture fit part of it.
Yeah.
And everything you just talked about is cultural within an organization. What are those what are those expectations? What type of culture do you have? The situation you described doesn't necessarily have to be a negative one.
Yeah.
If your organization is one where you need someone who can be incredibly independent and self-driven, if that's your culture and it's successful for you, identify that first.
Yeah.
And that leads into a little bit of kind of how we look for talent, is making sure before we look at anything else that someone is going to be a great culture fit for us.
Yeah.
Here's the big benefit. When you do that first, when that's the very first thing you look at, every single person that gets passed on to the next part of the process, the next panel, maybe the next hiring manager, is going to work in your organization. They're going to be a fit. And even if they're not necessarily a fit for the job you're interviewing for, you might find another place for them. We've had great success with that, of finding folks that's like, man, we know they're going to be a fit, and it didn't quite work out for that particular role. We found one later on, and man, home run.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I'm going to sound like beating a dead horse right now, but I am going to go back to the job description, because your job description will set people up for success or failure over and over and over. So, one thing that comes to mind from a culture fit is if you guys as a leadership team or sales or anything is looking around and you're like, how do we get out of this situation? How do we find momentum? And if everybody is looking around being like, I don't know. Okay, you need a strategist, right? You need somebody high level that will hold their own at the table, really have high levels of skepticism and comb through and find the real problem. But if you are very data driven, or you do have clarity around the different places of need that you have, being strategic and structured, what metrics are we looking at? What would they need? And having a point of view around that job description first. And then the big one that I want to go back to is don't shove too much in. You are not going to find somebody brilliant at graphic design and social and copy and technology and nurture and strategy and managing up and holding their own around, high D personalities. Like, no way. And so a lot of times they might have the right elements and they did some good strategic thinking and they just went, yeah, but we only want to hire one person. This is actually 3. Instead of thinking we could have got a freelancer, we could have hired a fractional CMO, we could have put a really talented person at highest and best use and then gave them a budget to work with an agency. There's so many different ways to do this, but marketing nowadays is around specialization, and I would argue sales is getting around specialization as well. And so just throwing a generalist in there, if that's not really what you need, is incredibly dangerous for both you and them.
I love that you framed that in that way, because making sure that someone is a good fit is also looking at who's going to thrive and grow in that role. Because growth is such a huge part of retention that people don't talk about enough.
Yes, and especially in sales and marketing, you cannot have a person that has a system that has always worked for them. Immediately red flags, no way. Because what we were deploying even for our clients 2 years ago, so different than now. I look at our own marketing, what we were doing 1 year from now, so different, and that's healthy. And so you are so right to have a sales or marketing person, anybody having to do business development, that is not always aggressively curious and growing and willing to kill their own sacred cows. Careful.
Yeah, if bonuses and sales incentives are your only retention technique, you've already shot yourself in the foot.
Oh my gosh.
And I think about some of the best teams that we get the opportunity to work with, their internal people are key to the organization's overall growth. Like, it's not just that their output is key.
Yeah.
Their input is key.
Yeah.
And they have their hands in helping to shape the direction of the company.
Yeah, 100%. I think what you're hitting on, and I'm so glad because I want to say this to everybody, is that this is about a paradigm shift of alignment, of being goal-oriented. And, I like to argue that there needs to be a culture of growth. And I'm sure every one of us thinks that, of course, we're driving a culture of growth. But there is a very big difference between, so when do you think we're going to see results versus, so when do you think we're going to see results? Right? But that type of approach can scare your team into bad habits or limit good thinking, or even adjust job descriptions towards something that is restrictive versus, abundant.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you brought this framework to me around, and I love this, kind of like the 3 levers of high ROI hiring. So what are those?
Well, what this was born out of was looking at job descriptions that were page after page after page. And ultimately, was finding myself going, we can't find someone to check all these boxes. When you think of all of the different categories, that you can evaluate people, for me, they fall into 3 different generic, big pots, so to speak.
Yeah.
Talent, intelligence, and experience.
Yeah.
And each of them, people are going to have their strengths in different areas. There is no right answer, by the way. Okay, so we obviously all want to have somebody that is talented and intelligent and experienced, and those people do exist, but that may not always be the right answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's talk about talent for just a second. Talent is someone's innate natural ability. How easy does something come to them? I think a lot of times when we think about talent, especially in marketing, we're thinking about creatives, we're thinking about designers. We can look at the work they do and immediately that can jump off the page. Do they have a vision? Can they take a company's brand, for example, and amplify it in a way that nobody else thought of?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a spectrum to talent that you need to be honest about your organization. So there are people that have raw, amazing talent. And so you need to ask yourself, do we have the mentorship structure, training, or resources to take potential? and really develop it that's good for them and good for you. On the flip side, if we've been in this situation, when we were a much smaller agency, I might see amazing raw talent, but I didn't have another creative director to guide that person, or we didn't have the training or the insight. And so I had to hire someone more on the mature spectrum of talent, where they had really crystallized it and honed their own talent so that they became leaders in the company and helped us form that later we could hire the younger talent. But you've got to be clear on where you're at on that.
That leads to one of the downfalls of hiring people whose primary value is in the talent category, is their productivity can be all over the place. If they find a client or a project where they click, man, it's going to be through the roof, right? The ROI on that is going to be really high. But when that connection isn't there, because everything they're bringing to the table is innate, it doesn't work.
And if they're waiting for inspiration versus being a pro where they know how to create inspiration and momentum, that's a really, really good point. I love that one.
So that gets us to intelligence. And that's not just, is somebody smart? Although it can be really easy just to kind of throw that one out there. When we talk about intelligence, we're talking about people that approach things with curiosity. Their innate ability is to look at big problems, look at complex things, and help come up with simple solutions to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and again, back to that job description, defining intelligence. There are intelligence where it's highly analytical, and they are so amazing at data-driven reporting and analysis or systems type of thinking. But then there's intelligence that's making connections between unconnected things and solving problems or gaining clarity or team unity or surprising solutions that truly came out of unique, authentic intelligence. Which one do you need?
Exactly.
So again, back to that job description where it's not just about being smart, like having the appropriate intelligence, so important.
Yeah, for sure. And when you think about one of the downfalls in that area is interestingly enough, for people who are really smart, it can kind of pigeonhole them into very specific roles.
And they get locked into their thinking, and that's so dangerous. It doesn't really matter how smart or how right or intelligent they are, but that stubborn element. And sometimes it's even about, okay, stop chasing what's innate. Use that intelligence to push your boundaries on what you need. So like one example from my background, God, this is going to sound terribly not humble at all. But in all seriousness, there was a part of my career as a marketer where I had to decide to get really data savvy. I don't love spreadsheets. I don't love diving into dashboards and just digging, but I'm capable of doing it. And eventually my curiosity ended up helping me to build a narrative and really wanting to go deeper in the numbers, even though I am never going to be an analyst. I am never going to be a spreadsheet wizard, but that was a really important component. And I really look for that, where even if it's a quote unquote weakness, if it's a technical weakness, you can still use your intelligence to bridge that gap and build a framework where then you can partner with the right people and bring the right questions, because the quality of the answer is dependent on the quality of the question. And for me, that's intelligence. You know what I mean?
It is. And one thing that I look for when I'm gauging intelligence is, do people apply those innate problem-solving skills they have to themselves?
Yeah.
Do they look at their own shortfalls, their own areas of growth, and do they apply the same level of rigor?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so then the third one you said was experience. Now, I'm super interested to dive into this because, I got some prickly things to say about experience.
Yeah, experience is an interesting one because common logic would say that someone who has a lot of experience is probably going to have some talent, and they're probably going to be smart. And you know what? Oftentimes that's true, but not always. Especially in a larger corporate setting, there's always going to be people who do enough. They check the boxes, and a lot of times that's what a hiring manager or a manager in general is looking for, because they're trying to put fires out. If you're checking the boxes, you're not on anyone's radar, then you're making it to the next day, the next week, the next quarter. But that's kind of all you're going to get.
Yeah.
Sometimes that can absolutely be the right choice.
Yeah.
If you're in a situation where you need predictability,
Yeah.
this particular role, it's like, we don't really need to have any questions with this. We need someone who's just going to be a good day-to-day producer. You're looking for that person that has a lot of experience.
At the Marketing Blender, we have fractional CMOs and outsourced marketing teams to drive your success. The two most common problems that we are approached about is how do we break revenue plateaus and accelerate success, or how do we attribute marketing to revenue impact? And the answer is that we build a system, because your marketing should be driving revenue, it should be driving your reputation, and it should be driving resilience. If you want to learn more, check out themarketingblender.com.
I interviewed a chief marketing officer quite a while ago, like way back, and their experience was stunning. Like, I'm looking at the resume like, wow. Now, two interesting things. When I asked them questions, it was very jargonator type of answers. They were broad, sweeping corporate explanations. And it told me two things. Yes, you've been in those environments. And where the heck is the specificity? Like, what did you do? Like, why isn't there a story? Like, why aren't you naming your, collaborator or what your team was like, or what leadership thought about that? Because with these big experiences, there's usually conflict, and there's usually struggles you had to come through that really turned you into who you were, that were career making or breaking, and then broke you through, even if it was a failure. And I never could get substance on it. And then also be so careful about assuming what their experiences are just because of their resume.
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that. What's one of the first things that everyone puts on a resume? Needs 3 to 5 years experience.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
We all do it. We've done it. Everyone does it. But again, if you're in a high volume situation where you've got huge numbers of applicants, and an ATS or an AI is helping you with that initial screening process, not to say that's a negative, there's just no way to get around that sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you put that 3 to 5 years experience in there, yes, that may be the ideal. We're putting together the perfect person to solve all of our pain points. But what you're going to miss out on, and we're going to get to this in a second, you're going to miss out on my favorite kind of applicant.
Okay. I love it. Okay. You can't leave us on that. What's your favorite kind of applicant?
Well, each of these different people and combinations of people can solve problems in your organization.
Yeah.
Right? There's a time when you want the person who is just that raw talent.
Yeah.
Especially if you, as you said, you've got an infrastructure of education that you can build around them.
Right.
Having that really highly intelligent analytical person can be great, especially if you've got major data problems that you need to solve.
Right. Exactly.
Having the steady experience, just that predictable, you know what you're going to get. Sometimes that's the piece you need.
Yeah, and if you need somebody to be able to plug in super fast and they're a culture fit, there you go. Yep.
And then you start combining all of these, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the monkey in the room is the combination of all three that everybody's looking for. Here's the part people don't think about. If you've got someone that is experienced and is an incredible talent and is really, really smart, you're going to get great production out of them immediately, which is what you're expecting.
Yeah.
The challenge is keeping that person, because their curve starts at a certain point and it just keeps going up.
Yeah.
That's an important part of this. Is there's a very clear, very predictable growth curve for each of these different archetypes.
Yeah.
The person with all three already starts pretty high up on your axis and they keep going up, but usually their curve has a defined stopping point because they outgrow the role.
And you better know why, what your value proposition to them, and be able to hear in that interview why they would want to stay. Like, there's got to be something substantial, personal, significant, values aligned, vision aligned, something where you believe to the core of your being they get it and they want to stay, and I'm not just being hopeful that they won't outgrow us and peace out 2 years later.
You just used one of the most dangerous words in hiring.
Hope.
Hope.
I know.
Man, I hope they stay. I hope they love
Yeah.
this.
Because that's your gut telling you the truth.
It
that
is.
you saw something. You're like, they're going to leave.
Your ROI
Yes.
your ROI on that hire is probably going to be fantastic, but if in 2 quarters they outgrow it and they move on to another role, and even if it's another role in your company, even if it's another department, and you're having to start the hiring process all over again, is your total ROI where it needs to be on that? Maybe, maybe not, but it's an important point you got to consider, because when that shiny Ferrari drives in front of you at a great price, it's hard to say no, but it's worth taking time to think about. My favorite type of hire is the one that is high talent, high intelligence, little to no experience.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm going to tell you why. On their growth curve, they start at the very, very bottom. They don't have any experience.
Yeah.
They haven't done this. Maybe they're fresh out of college.
Yeah.
But because they have that innate talent and they've got the intelligence to match it, their growth curve is exponential. And they get to grow with you. You get to grow with them, and that investment that you're making in each other really contributes to a lot of long-term success, not just for the organization, but for you. And there's a lot of data that says that person, when you invest in them, can be loyal.
Yeah.
And boy, loyalty is something that I feel like we just don't see nearly as much as we used to. There's
No,
a
we
reason
really
that
don't.
pensions don't exist anymore.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But there's a lot of data that says that person will stay longer than just about any other archetype.
I totally agree. And I'm going to go ahead and add those caveats about a high talent, high intelligence person with low experience. You have to absorb the investment. You have to have appropriate expectations that you are going to invest. And just like any financial investment, it takes time for you to see your return. And so you need to make sure that you're really nurturing that person and being there with them and having appropriate expectations. And you do need to make sure that the job description you ask them to do is doable. Like, are there any landmines that you accidentally put there where they really did need that? Now, if you can shore them up, train them, put them into some paid training program, and you have the runway of time where you can give that to them, I love it and could not agree more with Ryan on this. However, just make sure that where you are in your company and in your management structure and in your expectations, that you are really, really ready to make sure that you are being truly good to that person so they can be good to you too.
How do we find that person?
Oh, go ahead. Well, we've found a couple of them. So yeah.
We have found a couple of them.
We also hire really slow. Like, we will scratch entire pools of candidates if they're not our person, no matter how bad we need that role.
Yeah, and let's be honest, sometimes that's not possible.
No, I know. So true.
But if you can make it a possibility, do it. Man, do it.
Yeah.
Because again, making the wrong hire, the cost is just so high.
Yep.
I always love to hear when I'm interviewing somebody, I listen to their answers, but I am so much more interested in the questions they ask.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you an example from back in the past. Of an interview with a candidate who was clearly talented and was someone who fit the first 2 categories. They were talented and they were intelligent. They didn't have a whole lot of experience. And what won our entire panel over was we got to the point where you say what questions you have for us. There were 8 people on this interview panel, and they had a specific question for every person there. There were no generic questions.
Yeah.
There wasn't a, well, you tell me about this, or can you guys, they went person to person on the panel, and they had a question that only that person really was going to have the expertise to answer.
Yeah.
They had done their homework. They knew who we were about, but these weren't fluff questions. These were legitimate things. We could tell immediately that this person was also trying to figure out whether or not they were a match.
Yeah.
Bingo.
I love it. Now, if we're talking about somebody with experience, the questions that I'm looking for from a marketer back to me are extremely specific, like where they are asking about the kind of campaigns we've run, the kind of clients that we've done, like our philosophy on things, what tech stack do we have, and where you start hearing both their curiosity, but they have a little like, am I going to be set up for success here? But it usually for me is found in that specificity where the nature of their questions is telling me how much they really know and how much their hands have been on the tools that we're asking them to wield, which I really, really love. I'm going to flip it around just for a second, on questions that they ask on on a salesperson, the question I always want to ask them are, tell me about your typical day. Amazing salespeople always have a typical day. They have healthy habits that drive consistency of activity and consistency of follow-up. And also in regards to the question that a salesperson, I want to hear them asking me, I definitely want to hear them saying, what kind of CRM are you on? What kind of pipeline do we have? What are you doing in marketing? Like but it's the same thing. Like I want to hear their hands on that information, imagining themselves in your office being like, am I being set up for success here? Because that person is ready to run. And especially if you want a high ROI marketer or salesperson, like I love what you're saying about like, pay attention to what's in their questions.
Yeah. Have they done the thing or have they been around the thing?
Exactly. Yeah. Huge difference. Huge difference. Absolutely.
You know, one of the things I always listen for is ownership language.
Yeah. Yeah.
People who speak in we's and us,
Yeah.
who are already projecting themselves in a really authentic way into your organization and into that role.
Yes. It's interesting. I'm writing down the word influence because in thinking about, hiring marketing and salespeople, especially, like we're talking about, experience, but, you are really pushing hard on intelligence, and culture. And I'm like, I completely agree, because transferable skills, so your question a minute ago was, where do we find these people? They might not be in your industry. Let me repeat, your amazing salesperson, your amazing marketer might not come from your industry, because that is trainable, especially if you put them with a subject matter expert. We are deep B2B specialists. We have 50 clients and growing at any given time. And my people sometimes have never seen your industry, and they can learn it just like that. That's what you want. So I love transferable skills outside of the industry, and oftentimes outside of the actual job description. So here's where an experience component comes in. So maybe they don't have experience being that specific type of marketer, but are they in another environment of influence?
Oh, yeah.
Education, such a great one. People are getting burned out. They're getting mistreated. They're workhorses. They are heart forward. They're purpose driven. They understand process. They understand bureaucracy. And they're amazing at exerting influence with upper leadership, with parents, with kids, with all sorts of complicated environments. Holy cow.
Guys,
so that's such a good one.
It is. Guys, if you need someone who can solve processes, problems, and people, go hire a teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And there are a lot of environments where if you look at where are people being mistreated, but they had to be wickedly amazing to get in. Healthcare is another one.
Oh my goodness.
Go steal from a different industry that has the type of perspective and that high ability to learn, retain information, be in complex, high-paced environments. My God, it's not just on Indeed.
And we love Indeed.
Yeah, we use it.
Some of our favorite CMOs that we've worked with weren't marketers.
No, exactly. And I mean, and that's so powerful because they are so practical. And you know what? I am a business person first. I was a salesperson before that. I'm a marketer last, and now I'm known for marketing strategy, and only because God, but that's a great example of just let the right person, with the right support or the right curiosity infuse, your environment. So I love it. A couple other things about where to find them. Multi-channel. I want, if you're looking for a marketer or a really talented salesperson, go where they go, just like you would in marketing. Go to LinkedIn and Indeed, that's fine. Go to your referral sources, that's fine. We've helped clients find people on Pinterest and on Facebook and, by tapping into environments and, and really tapping referral sources. So I really do want to see a wider berth of reach out where you think your ideal people are. Because it just takes a little bit of extra thinking, not more money and not necessarily more time to find the people that are really right for you. So, I think people are just trying to shortcut it, and it's actually killing them. It's not shortcut at all in regards to where do you find talented people.
No, and I think if we were to put a single bullet point in this whole conversation, it would be don't take the shortcut. Whether it's rushing your interview process or your application process or whatever it may be, it's really easy to focus on that month's bottom line or that quarter's bottom line. And again, if you got to do it, you got to do it. Know which archetype you're looking for, but ultimately your long-term ROI is going to be best served when you can take your time, know what your culture needs, and then go find that fit.
Exactly. Okay, one thing I want to bring up on behalf of candidates, marketing and sales candidates everywhere, is how they're being set up for failure. So aside from the process of your hiring and your job description, there are some dangerous habits that some of you guys have inside of your culture that really don't set marketing and sales talent up for failure. So we see a lot of marketing directors, even who love their jobs and love their companies, a little bitter, like they're bitter. And there's a couple of different things that we're seeing. You know, I mentioned earlier that environment of growth, and it's based in unity. Like we all want to achieve that goal, not I'm holding you accountable, marketer or salesperson. There's no marketer or salesperson on the planet that doesn't want to help achieve revenue growth. Like that's your portfolio. That's like everything you want to be.
It's the nature of
No
sales.
one's coming to work being like, I'm just going to mail it in and just do a crappy social media post today and call it a day. No, you know, so I think that one's a really big one. I think also, so two things. Salespeople need to be self-directed. So that means you cannot, like, you need to support them with healthy activity measurements and training, but no micromanaging. But technology and appropriate accountability where you can see them and let them run. On the marketing side, no micromanagement. Like we see leaders come in and go, I've got this great idea, or I want you to do exactly this, or I want our account to look exactly like our competitors, or, you know, and they're just constantly pointing a marketer in a million different directions that are not strategically appropriate nor aligned with revenue. And it's just that micromanagement, which I understand. It's your potential revenue. It's your reputation. You know, it's what your company stands for, but man, you gotta let smart people do smart work, you know? What are some other things that you see where people are set up for failure?
Well, matching their, I'm going to call it their sales talent to the role. And so I have a question for you. When we think about our B2B audience, where not always, but oftentimes we're talking about low volume, high ROI sales, how often do you see a misalignment in folks that are maybe better suited toward B2C roles that find themselves in that B2B type situation?
Great question. So on the marketing side, very frequently, right? Because you can see beautiful marketing. So somebody from B2C might have a visual portfolio that's really stunning, or they might have been a part of a campaign or a company or a logo that you're like, wow, and you kind of get blinded by the light, right? But so, and then in marketing is about pipeline management,
right?
You know, and alignment with sales. And also you have to speak the lingo. You can't write copy that glossed over the technical subject matter expertise. So I do see some difficulties for transitioning B2C to B2B because they want to go top of the funnel, and B2B needs to be bottom of the funnel and then back up. So I think that's a really good point. It's not that they can't do it,
right? But
I think it's a really good opportunity to have conversations about what they want to learn and whether or not it's transferable. And then I think on the sales side, it's about the type of sales cycle that people are running, right? So people that are great at relationship building, is your environment still based in relationships? If it's not, then you don't, you know, like then you don't need that type of a person. Or do you need to rejigger your sales team where you do have internal versus account managers versus follow-up people versus hunters? Or can marketing absorb all of that? And so I think it's just, I think so often people are looking for a superstar to fix their B2B problems. And what they should have done, and you're amazing at this, is like thinking, is it a people problem or a process problem? And I honestly think so frequently on the sales side, they have a process problem and they just keep trying to throw another person at that problem. And they're always set up for failure no matter how successful they might have been
Right.
in the past. So I think it's a little different there, where people abdicate responsibility on sales process too frequently. So,
And it's interesting to hear that differentiation, because one of the things that I see sometimes is that it feels like that the sales team and the marketing team are working in two different buildings.
oh yeah.
And you have your sales folks that are spinning their wheels while the marketing people are scripting things. And especially in B2B, making sure that your sales team is clued in on the marketing plan and is able to take that handoff
Yeah.
in a real logical way, no matter where in the funnel it is, because that can happen at different times.
Yeah.
Depending on how engaged that client is, what their needs are. If the sales team has no clue what's going on with the marketing plan, they're spinning their wheels, as I said, especially at the beginning, just trying to gain their footing.
Agreed. I mean, like a salesperson, especially a modern salesperson, should be thinking what's coming in through marketing. Where did that person, what did they experience before they, became a lead, or before I'm having my first meeting? Because in modern B2B sales, people are starting in the middle. They did a ton of research before they talked to that salesperson. And so a smart salesperson is harvesting every opportunity, not just old school traditional tactics where they own the entire funnel. So it's such a great point. And the alignment, just the handoff, you're so right. That is definitely how people are set up for failure on both sides.
If the only thing that you're relying on for that transfer of knowledge is your CRM,
Yeah.
oh my.
I know.
I mean, it's a minefield that you're walking into.
I can't even imagine the statistic about how many are not set up correctly. That alone can be such a huge problem. And if those people are not talking, you won't find the technology issue because the humans didn't talk about it.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Totally. Okay, so final wrap up, like final tips that you've got for creating a high performing business development team, both on marketing and sales, and just stopping this constant, because the average CMO turnover is less than 2 years.
Oh my.
Salespeople, same thing. Average B2B salesperson changes a job every 2.5 years. Like marketers, I don't even know, because it depends on their seniority. But if a CMO is at 2.5 years, what do you think a digital marketer's at?
I can't even begin to imagine.
Yeah, exactly. So what are some of your final wrap-ups for creating this high-performing marketing team?
We've talked so much about finding the right person and looking for the fit and culture, but once you actually get them in the door, being able to hang on to them, some things you're looking for, that I look for kind of in that critical first 30 days. Are they looking for context, not just checklists?
Yeah.
Are they reading into things? But then are you providing that for them? Ultimately, this comes down in a lot of ways to nurture and commitment. It's great that you have followed an awesome process for finding all this talent. Are you nurturing the talent? Mm-hmm. I am. Thank goodness I married who I married, because I can't keep a plant alive to save my life. I'd be going back to the nursery every single week to buy new plants and go, look, they're great. Are you watering your plants? Are you growing your people? We said early on that your people are one of the only assets that you have that appreciates.
Yeah, absolutely.
And building a team takes time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to get the pieces together, but then, man, make sure you're still providing that growth. And we could spend another hour and a half here talking about the ways that you can nurture a team, and maybe we'll put that on the list for down the road. But don't stop after the interview.
Exactly. Oh, I love it. I love it. And, growing an amazing high-performing team and leading that and seeing what they're capable of and seeing their potential unleashed is so dramatically important and just an amazing experience to go through as a professional and as a leader. So we really just keep encouraging you, always focus on this people problem, because it's the problem that unleashes all of your possibility. Now, going to leave a couple additional tips for you, or videos that we have. So 3 different videos for anybody that needs a deeper dive in specific areas. We've got one video that outlines 4 types of marketers and how to match a marketing role to where your organization is. So we're going to link that in the show notes. We've got another one where I talk to Mark Hunter, the sales hunter, and we do a deep dive on high performing salespeople. So this can really go back and influence the
whole pipeline of talent attraction that we were talking regarding the that side. And then the final one is if you're looking on how to reverse engineer the role and the job description back to return on investment. I did an entire return on investment episode, and it gives you the number one rule on the human translation that has to happen to set your marketing team up for success and to make your CFO actually a raving fan of marketing of sales instead of frustrated. So 3 additional resources for you. Ryan, thank you so much for being on the team, but most importantly, sharing your heart and your wisdom on this. So appreciate you.
It's fun as always.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time. Hit that subscribe button. You know you want to. Onward and upward.